Yay!
Hey, we've got live mics.
We have
Excellent.
volume. Awesome. Right, everybody pack on in. If there is a spare empty seat next to you, then please move into it. We're all very friendly here at Devox, so we need to hug lots.
Yeah,
Okay.
oh, at the end, it's out this door down here.
So, in the case of emergency, your exits are here. And here only. So we are going to have to cut this talk just a little bit short since things were running a little bit over time today. So if you are going to laugh, just please keep the laughter down to a minimum. This is a very serious talk.
Yeah.
So...
Now you've jinxed it, they're never going to laugh.
Oh no, it's terrible.
Okay. All right, should we get going?
We'll get going. So hi everybody, my name is Martijn Verburg. Those of you who saw me here last year as a Diabolical developer, telling you how to build software properly. So there were some complaints. They turned off the movie projector on purpose, people got up and left the room, and there were some angry people at the end. And they said, why are you telling us all of these lies? So I pleaded with Stefan and said, can I please come back and bring along the voice of reason here?
And I'm Ben Evans, and I think that's probably, since we started doing this talk, I think it's the first time I've ever been called the voice of reason.
So this is Ben. So what we're going to talk about today is a continuation of last year's theme, which is really that we've got all these wonderful tools and techniques today, and yet we're still utterly crap at developing software.
Hands up who thinks they're brilliant at developing software. Oh, there's always one.
two brave people at the start. Right, we're going to take a look at your GitHub account afterwards.
Yep.
And have everybody at Devox take a look. So I guess we'll begin with private hell. So if you have your own anti-pattern that you would like us to cover towards the end of the talk, then please send in a tweet with the hashtag of Devox and hell. And I'm sure there's some good stories out there to tell. We had Java 1, I think we had someone tell us about the 10,000 if statements in a single class. Was quite a good one. So yeah, go for it. So we've got about 10 anti-patterns to cover, and we're going to whip through them reasonably quickly to get you guys out on time. And we'll begin with number 1.
Yep.
Conference-driven delivery. You will have seen this all week.
Yep. However, there is one little caveat that we should add when talking about conference-driven delivery. So anybody who might feel in the mood to be heckling, for example, yeah, if you suggest that this talk resembles conference-driven delivery, then we're going to feed you to this guy.
Notice the sharp teeth. So if you feel anything running around your seats or between your legs or running up and down, eating cables, don't mind it. It's just our friendly tame killer otter. So I personally believe that real professionals, and you'll see them sitting around the hacker garden space, the ones who are looking slightly stressed and tapping away on slides, those are the professional speakers you've been seeing all week. So I personally think that the stress of having to deliver 30 minutes before a major audience such as yourselves makes for a far better slide deck and a far better talk.
Especially if you're listening to Eye of the Tiger all the time when you're hacking that last 30 minutes.
That's right. So, yeah, so that's what I believe. Well, what do you believe, Ben?
Well, anybody know what this stands for? Anybody? No, this is probably restricted to the native English speakers. This is a quite common acronym. It stands for Proper Preparation Prevents Piss Poor Performance. And it's true. Basically, well, yeah, you've seen some really great speakers this week. I mean, I'm thinking in particular of guys like Neil Ford. And the only way that you get to that level of doing decent conference preparation and delivery is to do proper preparation beforehand. I know how hard Neil and Matthew McCulloch and some of the other superstars in our community work on their talks. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to actually produce something which is as much about narrative and about performance as it is actually about the slides themselves. So take your time, not saying, prepare months in advance and then just give the same style material again and again, but actually spend some time on each version of the presentation you're going to give. It's always something new to be worked out and some interesting little nuance.
So you might be thinking to yourself, well, how on earth can I become as good as presenting, even if it is just to my colleagues, about an idea I have, or speaking at a major conference, perhaps giving a lightning talk at your local Java user group, What can I do? And, well, we go back to software principles, test-driven presentations, right? So it is actually amazing to watch yourself speak, to pick up on all the little annoying bad habits you have, like me speaking too fast with my strange New Zealand accent. And you can iron these little bugs out by starting off, believe it or not, talking to yourself in the mirror. Your family and friends will probably think you are going crazy, but this is the way that you actually start. And then you give a talk to a loved one, someone who will be supportive of you.
Like your teddy bear?
Like your teddy bear. And a smaller group until you grow and grow into larger groups. So test drive your presentations first. Even if it's an important design discussion that you want to get across to your colleagues, practice it to yourself first before you go presenting it to them.
Okay, next anti-pattern, I think.
Next anti-pattern. This is one of my favorites.
Mortgage-driven development.
Who here has a mortgage? Right. Well, we have tough economic times today, don't we, ladies and gentlemen? We are in a recession across the Western world, and it's very important for us to keep our jobs. So, to make sure that nobody steals your job, you have to make sure that you don't document anything. Don't communicate with the rest of your team, and if you do, make sure you do it in the opposite language. If you're working in North Belgium, write everything in French, and reverse the case. If you have any English visitors, just write it in any old European language they won't understand.
What about things like source control?
Source control. So with source control, you need to make sure that other people don't have control of the source code. Source code is king. So make sure you copy the source code onto a USB stick at the end of every day, pop it in your pocket, and take it home with you.
But what about versioning in source control?
Versioning in source control. Versioning, you need to make sure that you've got a scheme that only you and you understand. I like to have a folder structure starting with A, and then B, C, D. If I run out of letters in the alphabet, it's quite simple. AA, AB, AC. Works great. I still have my job, by the way. Can you say the same thing?
So don't succumb to fear. You know, it is tempting. I have actually certain developers who probably should know better and shall remain nameless to spare their blushes, actually coming up with ideas that were not too far away from mortgage-driven development after a couple of beers. My finance director has what he calls the 2-beer test, where if you take someone down the pub, they may espouse these great principles and proper professionalism, but as soon as you get them down the pub and feed them 2 beers, then ask them how they really run their jobs. And a lot of the stuff that you'll hear actually is just too close to the diabolical developer for comfort. Proper communication is essential. Don't be a cave troll. The people that communicate, who are able to understand and work across functional boundaries. I mean, I think it was Neil yesterday who was talking about how organisations seem to form themselves around the HR department's view of the world. And instead, we need to do more to communicate across boundaries and to try to make the world look more like the way that software people and technical people think about it. So key to that is communication and talking to your peers, not just other developers, operations folk, people in the testing organisation. There is so much value to be gained by starting to work with people from across the organisation and across disciplines.
Yeah, and you can see it very clearly in popular open source projects such as the Linux kernel. It really is the developers on that kernel mailing list who are able to communicate their ideas across most clearly that get their ideas into the Linux kernel. There have been plenty of fantastic technical ideas that people have proposed on that mailing list in particular, but because they did so in a poor manner, either using poor English or being aggressive or rude or arrogant in their communication, their idea just never made it to mainline. Linus just says, piss off, not interested. And the same goes for your organization. If you want one of your designs or one of your principles to go into source control and be accepted by the rest of your team, you have to be able to communicate that effectively. Because if you can't, then yes, you will be having to accept your colleagues' 35,000 line Java classes because you weren't able to argue correctly against it. So that covers Mortgage-driven development.
I know you could talk about mortgage-driven development all day, but we have other anti-patterns to look at.
Anti-patterns, and this one's a key one at Devox in particular.
Distracted by shiny.
Distracted by shiny.
Okay, who liked the robots yesterday? Let's hear it for the robots.
Yay! Who now wants to quit their job and go coding robots? Yay!
Who actually is going to quit their job and go coding with robots? One person.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Good on you. So I always say that you should always use the very latest bleeding edge technology because it will keep you ahead. Okay? I don't want to be lumped in the group of boring Java developers who convert XML to Java and Java back to XML again as my day job. I want to be using alpha builds of Scala, combine that with a little bit of Clojure, run it on a modified version of the .NET runtime, and of course HTML5 everywhere.
Yeah.
That way people think I'm ahead of the curve and I'm elite and people will keep hiring me.
So are there things other than alpha builds of Scala?
Ooh, do we have any Scala fans in the room? Get out. We're going to rag on you guys all day today, so yeah, be prepared.
And how do you feel about IDEs? I mean, what's your take on the latest and greatest IDE to use?
Latest and greatest IDE. Well, I'm sort of torn between the latest Eclipse and Vi.
I'm going to get you a Real Men Use Vi t-shirt.
Yeah, Real Men Use Vi. Yes, you should absolutely use the very latest bleeding edge Eclipse. Make sure you pile in all of the plugins, especially the Maven plugin, because it's really, really efficient. That way you get on Hacker News as well. Brilliant.
So how do we do our best to take the sting out of some of this terrible poison that the Diabolical developers are throwing at us? Well, prototype and evaluate. Yeah, the fact is, many developers like to experiment and to use the latest tech, whether or not it's actually solving a real business problem. Now, the flip side of that is there is actual real business advantage in some of these technologies. But learning to separate the hype from the reality and finding out where your sweet spot is for new tech is actually a bit of an art form. For example, web frameworks. Everybody's got a web framework. Everyone's got a favorite one. And when it comes down to it, a lot of developers' opinions about their web frameworks are kind of subjective. So there was a piece of work done by a guy called Matt Rabel about 18 months ago, where he basically produced a framework for evaluating web frameworks. It wasn't a web framework itself, because that would be too meta. That would be like frameworkception.
That'd be awesome.
But it's actually just a spreadsheet where you apply weightings to different criteria that you think are important in a web framework, and then it outputs you an answer of which one is best suited to your needs. And it's by taking that approach of being empirical and thinking as much as you can about what aspects of a technology stack are important to you that you get the most benefit out of stuff. There was this blog post recently on carfi.com. So it's really about why good technologists end up making bad technology decisions. Because we've all done it. We've all got distracted by the thought of using something absolutely lovely and shiny, and you've ended up coming up with a completely bogus and bullshit reason to get it shoved into the project somehow just because you wanted to play with it.
Node.js.
Node.js.
Ooh, didn't get any boos from the audience.
Interesting. So the five forces that basically this blog post describes, and do have a look for it, about what drives these choices are basically boredom, because we've all been in jobs which are just boring as hell, and you just want to do something to liven up your day, and something other than the same old churning through Java and XML and layer upon layer of horrendous configuration that needs to happen. Then, of course, there's CV++. Talk a bit more about that one in a minute. Peer pressure. Everybody else has jumped on the NoSQL bandwagon, and you're just too embarrassed to admit that actually you haven't had the time to research it, and so you keep feeling you're losing the debates against your peers, and so you end up jumping on the bandwagon as well, even though it may or may not be suitable. Yeah,
there was a phase for a while, wasn't there, on mainly Java mailing lists, like on the Java Posse mailing list, that if you didn't know what category theory was, you weren't a real developer. I still don't know what category theory is, and I sure as hell don't know what monads are either. And you know what? I'm actually still able to write code, so it's okay.
Yeah. So what can you do to solve some of this? Well, brown bag sessions. Hands up if you ever heard of the term egoless programming. No, wow, this is a really egotistical audience. So this is basically the idea that you should not, while it's possible to have pride and a lot of
Hubris.
personal investment, hubris, good word,
Yeah.
investment in your code, it's also possible to do that without letting it become an extension of self. You should just aim to write good code. Code reviews are not the enemy. This isn't Scientology. We don't put you in a code review in order to try and hurt you and to say you're a bad person and to rag on your code. It's actually there to make the project better. And one of the things that we've experienced in running our startup is by sticking rigidly to having code review for everything and making every single person go through code review and treating it as a completely egalitarian experience, people can actually produce much, much better code. I mean, our technical debt is just amazingly low, I think, for a project that moves as fast as we do. And the key to that is knowledge sharing and approaching your development practices with a completely open hand.
Yeah. So it boils back down to the communication aspect again, and so we are huge fans of these brown bag sessions to introduce new technologies to your entire team and to discuss A, whether they're cool and shiny and fun to use, but B, will they add some practical value to the project? So as an example, our little flagship tool that we'll be releasing shortly, we had to make the decision on how we were going to build the DSL for it. And on the JVM, there are several languages which are really, really good that you can build a DSL out of. Scala.
And then there's Java.
And there's Java. So there's Scala, there's Groovy, JRuby, you can use Jython. There's all these kind of dynamic style languages that are really, really fantastic to use. By having us actually run through some brown bag sessions, testing out each of these languages, we were able to, one, enjoy ourselves by doing a new language a day, which was really, really fun. And more importantly, we were actually able to very quickly narrow down what language we wanted to use for our DSL. And at the moment, the winner happens to be Scala, and primarily because of its improved tooling support, not because it's inherently better as a language than, say, Groovy. So, that was that anti-pattern. On to the next one.
Design-driven design.
Design-driven design.
Design for the sake of doing nothing but design. Hands up if you like design. Who likes doing all of that upfront, grubbing around with classes and domain modeling?
Ooh. Are there no enterprise architects in this room? Come on, system architects even?
None that are admitting to it. This is fantastic.
Fantastic. DevOps is a conference for developers. Fantastic. So, design-driven design. UML Code Generators, grok. Who here has used IBM's Rational Unified Modeling Process Tooling Suite thingamajig? I don't even know.
Oh, there we are. That's actually a decent smattering.
So there's at least 30 hidden enterprise architects in this room. I knew it.
So what's happened now is down on the exhibition floor, one of the IBM sales guys, his antennas have just pricked up, is going to come barreling through this crowd up here and will appear in the room any second now.
And make sales.
Yep.
So UML is king. You should have sequence diagrams and class diagrams everywhere because this is how we should communicate our code to each other, right? And what I personally like to do is to make sure that I generate all of my UML and I print it out on A0 pieces of paper and just paste it like 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way across my office walls. And then if anyone ever dares questions my design, because I'm the CTO of the company, so what I say goes, right? I just point them at sheet number 58 and say, well, it's obvious. It's been diagrammed. What more do you need? Yep, try this at home, seriously. Your colleagues won't try and kill you, honestly. So definitely having UML that then automatically generates your classes for you so you don't have to write any code is also a great thing to do. If you've been listening lately to either, I think, Gartner or Forrester research where they're telling us that, it's all going to be 4GL languages from now on. You just draw a nice UML diagram, click a button, and your code is done for you. The reality is here, folks.
I haven't been saying that for the last 20 years.
30, I think. Right.
So design for what you need now. Rather than going through a huge upfront design phase and trying to think about every aspect of the system. The reality is, and this is kind of what we call small a Agile. I mean, I'm not a huge believer in what I always like to call the church of Agile, with the long white flowing robes and the certified Scrum Master badge on your robes.
Do we have any certified Scrum Masters in the room? Are you going to be brave enough?
There we go.
You're all part of a pyramid scheme, damn you.
Yeah. Now, you see, everyone knows that DevOps is a scam, right? Now, at least the Scrum people, they know how to monetize the scam. So seriously, design for what you need now. Don't try to overreach and do too much in the upfront phase. One of the things about that makes Agile work when it does work, and I've always felt that it's kind of an accumulation of practices, and there's a whole bunch of sweet spots where certain combinations of practices will work for certain teams. There is no one winning formula. Successful teams are lucky enough or skilled enough to navigate into their sweet spot of practices which work for them. But one of the key points which seems to come up, and I don't think I've ever seen a successful team who used Agile-style practices, is the one about don't over-design. Just build the bit of design you need for the things you need to deliver right now, and just ship often and do a bit more design when you need it.
I think the key thing here is, and a lot of people have talked about this before, so it's not really a new concept, is the idea is you want to get your code in the hands of either your colleagues or your actual end users as soon as possible. Because you have no way of anticipating how they're going to use it, how they're going to react to it, what feedback they're going to give you, what changes they might want. And if you're designing all of this what-if scenario type stuff, you're not actually listening to the person who's really going to end up using your code. And it is a fatal, fatal, fatal mistake, Netscape Navigator. So what can you do? Well,
less source code.
Less source code. So Ben and I, we both follow the philosophy that you should kind of pay your junior developers to produce code, and you should pay your senior developers to take it away.
I mean, we're very used to thinking of code as an asset, but is it really? I mean, it's by definition the place where bugs hide. So the more of it you have, the more bugs you have, the more things which are liabilities, the more things which represent support cost. So in what sense is having more code better? All it's doing is it's giving you places where you have exposure, where you have risk, and where you have potential failure. So the less of it there is, the less places there are for those things to hide.
So I will temper that slightly. So this is basically us telling you for everyone to move to closure, right?
I think this is a great idea.
Yay, closure! There's a big closure.
Small community, but very, very vocal.
Very vocal. Community of one at DevOps. Brilliant. But in all seriousness, yes, certainly reduce your source code, but don't forget you are going to be the poor person taking the support call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and if you cannot read your lovely squished up source code at 2 o'clock in the morning after a Belgian beer too many, you've caused yourself your own problem. But certainly exploring languages outside of Java on the JVM to reduce kind of the boilerplatey nature that Java sometimes forces you into is a great thing, and it really does reduce your bug count. So that was number 4. And have we had anything from the audience yet, actually?
Oh, we've had a load of stuff from the audience.
Loads of stuff, fantastic.
Do you want to do some stuff from the audience? 5 minutes?
Yeah, we can cover a few in the audience.
Yeah.
What have we got?
Okay. So, I like this one. This is a code comment. This global common prepared statement, static property, helps us avoid costly new prepared statement. So these guys basically have a single static prepared statement which they just reuse. They're basically object pooling. No, that's horrible. There's lots of people that are claiming that actually the 16K line Java class with 1,000 lines of code methods, yep, that's my coding.
Well, at least people are prepared to admit it. My record, by the way, is 37,000 lines in a Java class. If you take a look at an open source project called PCGen and go back in its subversion history a few years back, you will proudly see my author comment at the top, God class. Ooh. Oh, we need some power here. It dropped out.
Okay. Fortunately, we have power.
This time they didn't turn off the movie projector, we just sabotaged ourselves.
You see, I even got it out. I just haven't plugged it in.
Stop talking. Hey, there we go.
And we're back.
All right.
Now, I like this one as well. Someone's complaining about their chair. They think their chair is their biggest anti-pattern. My chair is not an Aeron. Okay, sucks to be you.
You got to join a lean startup, man. Lean startups all get the Aeron chairs. They're cool.
Yeah, not only that, you get to be called an agile ninja.
All right. We'll go on back to our form patterns. So the next pattern is Pokemon patterns. You got to catch them all. Who here has got children? Whose children still love Pokemon, or are they all now? Is that now a generation gone? Maybe.
I think you've just dated yourself.
I think I've just dated myself badly. Anyway, here they are. So let's see if this laser pointer thingy works. Oh, there we go. So that one there is the model view controller. Over there we have session facades. What's that one, Ben?
That's the FactoryFactoryManagerBuilder builder.
Factory manager. Oh, right, cool. So that's the one from Spring Source then?
Yep.
Cool. Apologies to our Spring Source colleagues. We didn't mean it. Well, really? Actually, we kind of did.
Wow.
So I like to say, use all of the Gang of Four design patterns. There is nothing more impressive when you walk into your new job on day one, thump down Goff, and go, right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to design software and we're going to do it properly. We're going to do it by the Bible, by the book. So yeah, you need to have your model view controllers in there, service locators, throw in an abstract factory. Definitely make sure you've got some singletons in there, always good. And if you have enough of them together, by definition, you are doing best practices. And if you're doing best practices, then nothing can possibly go wrong. You're doing exactly what the industry experts have told you to do.
You do know what the road to hell is paved with, don't you?
My advice?
Well, pretty much. Okay, so the appropriate pattern is your friend. There's kind of a couple of interesting things to talk about here. First of all, I had a guy come to me for a job a couple of years ago, and we seemed to do, went through the interview. He seemed to do pretty well. He'd just been left a major exchange,
I love this
and
story.
had come to apply for a new job, and did pretty well. Got to the interview, and I said, okay, so if you could kind of just sum up what you currently do in your job, could you explain it to me in just a couple of sentences? He goes, well, I go to the insert name of major global consultancy, book of approved design patterns, and select appropriate things. I'm like, what? It's like, we have a book. The book tells me which patterns to use. Okay, I do not know how I got that out of there. I mean, I was just as shocked and stunned by that. I just sort of stood there with my mouth open for a minute and then somehow managed to change the subject and get him the hell out of that room. Because there was no way that anyone whose idea of software architecture is, I look it up in a book which has approved stamped on it, is ever going to come and work for me.
What's wrong with that? That's why you have these books in the first place.
So patterns are great, and it's kind of strange. They have this almost like a life cycle. So a design pattern is a convention, and it's a style, and it's a way of doing something. But by definition, when you use one, you're using something which isn't a language feature, because you have to recognize the pattern, you have to recognize the convention, you have to recognize the way of doing it. So that means that by definition, what you've got is something which is missing out of the language. So over time, as we develop newer and hopefully better languages, we find that certain things which started off as a convention or as a design pattern actually move into the language itself. Okay? So as an example, let's think about concurrency. So we have now 15 years' experience of dealing with Java's concurrency. And, well, it's better than nothing. But the problems that it have, mostly to do with visibility and mutability, are pretty deep-seated. So modern languages like Clojure, dare I say it, even Scala, have tried to solve this by hiding a lot of the underlying concurrency basics like thread away. In Scala, you use actors. In Clojure, they're called agents. But it's the same pattern. It's about message passing. It's about hiding state. It's about using a higher level mechanism to transfer data around. And of course, there's nothing stopping you in doing that in Java. But in Java, you have to represent it as a pattern rather than having it built into the language itself. So There's something to think about there. So that's another piece which goes into the trade-off about choosing languages. You can do any style of coding in pretty much any language. You can write object-oriented coding in C, but you end up with function pointers and basically building your own vtables, and it's just a huge, horrible hack and nasty. But you can do it.
Object-oriented in VB6?
Now that really is diabolical.
I challenge any of you to go home and try it, if you can still find VB6 somewhere to download and run.
So what do? Well, you select your technologies appropriately, and then you whiteboard. The whiteboard is your friend. That's the place where you and the rest of your team should come together. It's where you should try out new ideas, and that should be a very open conversation. There's nothing wrong with having a straw man which gets ripped apart by your colleagues.
Yeah. Who here carries whiteboard markers with them at all times? Yeah.
How many of you do that just so that you can sniff them and get bored?
So, quite seriously, as developers and as developer/architects, and I certainly believe that there should be absolutely zero distinction between the two, because architects should still code and coders should do architecture. I think the two things are conjoined. Always carry either pen and paper with you. If you're really modern, have one of these fancy tablets with drawing capabilities, or carry whiteboard markers. You will be amazed at how many great ideas that you and your colleagues think of throughout the day, and it only takes 5 minutes to sit down, sketch out the pattern on paper, and voila, you've probably solved a problem that you've been, worrying about for weeks on end.
Yeah.
We constantly run across this in our startup because we are quite often exploring new ideas and new boundaries. We're using some machine learning and cool stats and stuff, and quite often we start out with the problem going, this is impossible. And 3 hours later, a guy will jump up at the whiteboard and say, hey, have we thought about trying this? And then all of a sudden the problem is solved.
I mean, your colleagues aren't idiots. I mean, I know that might be a very controversial statement, but they're really not. The guys you work with, by and large, are going to be pretty smart and pretty together kind of people. So your approach towards their ideas should basically be trust but verify. So by default, if you approach them with thinking that they've probably come up with something which has some sensible things in it and some value, but all you need to do is to talk about it, break it apart, and then verify what's good about it and where the soft spots are. And that's part of collective ownership of the design, rather than having somebody puts an idea up, everybody else rips it to shreds, and does so in a negative and personal attacking kind of way.
Cool. So we'll go on to one of our personal favourites because we are in the space. Do we have any performance tuning experts in the crowd? 1, 2. Is Kirk Pepperdine in the room somewhere? Hiding? Where is he?
No, he's not here.
He's not here to be heckled at. That's a shame. So tuning by Folklore. Now this is something that we have seen people do time and time and time again. So if you are going to do it, make sure you light some black candles. I recommend joining the Voodoo or Rastafarian religion. It does help to have sacrificial things, a nice, dare I say it, pentagram on the ground and that sort of thing. For those of you who used to work on Cisco routers, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So basically, you're all experienced people, right? And you know where the performance problems are. So make sure you go in and take out those string concatenations, make sure that you add more numbers to the database connection pool, make sure you just get rid of your database altogether, all that sort of good stuff. And just keep tinkering away until something falls out the back, I think is the way to performance tune. And Stack Exchange. Definitely get all of your tuning advice from Stack Exchange.
Measure, don't guess. I mean, this is I think probably the simplest way of describing an entire methodology and approach to performance tuning. You simply measure the system, decide what's important to you, measure it, have a look at it and say, is this where I need it to be? If it's not, you determine where it should be, you set yourself a performance goal, and then you go through and you pick it apart. You find out why it's running the way it is, break it down into its components, find the lowest hanging fruit, and move the system towards the performance goal. And then you iterate, you measure again. And if this sounds kind of boring, and not like the sort of uber performance tuning stuff where you just stare at your code until magically the answer as to why it's slow appears, then it's because it is boring. Performance tuning should be boring. It should be an empirical, repeatable, dismal science. They call economics the dismal science, and this is very much in the same category. You just keep iterating over it until you hit your performance goal. If you haven't set a performance goal, you're not doing performance tuning. It's really that simple. Empirical evidence always trumps your intuition. Human beings have a lot of great strengths, but we also have a lot of weaknesses, notably our cognitive biases. The problem is almost certainly not what you think it is. The best example of this I can think of actually comes from C++. Hands up if you're a C++ programmer or have done any. Okay. Oh, quite a few. Cool.
Wow.
So in C++, there is a compiler directive, which for the non-C++ programmers, just think of it as an annotation, called inline. And it says inline this method. Instead of calling it, actually take the body of it and replace the method call with the body everywhere. Okay. Does anybody know what the inline pragma actually does? It does nothing, because it turns out that human beings are absolutely shit at knowing when to use it. And in almost all cases, it does more harm than good when given to a human. Does anybody know how Java deals with inlining? No? It's automatic. It's completely automatic. So basically, as the JVM is running, it spots which things are good to inline. So it uses empirical evidence. It uses real data to make those decisions, because humans are just awful at them.
Yeah. So what can you do? Shameless plug. Come join our friendly little community, and we will bore you to death with lots and lots of boring ways to gather data, do statistics, and performance tune.
Plug over.
Plug over. Number 7, the Deity. I touched on this slightly before. So one of the things I've discovered, especially with using modern IDEs, is that it is absolutely impossible to find where your code is. Right? I've implemented this rule, but I can't find in which class it lives in because I've got 3,000 classes and 18 levels of abstraction. So I've actually gone back to putting all of my code in one class. Now Java really helps with this because you can declare lots of anonymous inner classes inside a class, right? So basically using Control F or Apple or Command F in a single text editor window to be able to find your code is so much easier and so much faster than trying to use Eclipse's search functionality, for example. So one of my tips is to stop splitting out your code so much and actually start compacting it back in. There is a reason why VB6 was one of the most popular languages in the world, and that's because it encouraged you to follow this model of programming.
Yeah. Alternatively, we could actually try using some modern software development techniques. Has anyone heard of the SOLID principles? Oh, actually fewer than I would have expected. This acronym basically stands for 5 principles of software. The single responsibility principle, namely that a class or a method should just do one thing. Open for extension. Oh, and my personal favourite, the Liskov substitution principle. This is great. It sounds like something from Doctor Who. All it means is, if you have a class, then an instance of that class can be replaced by an instance of any subclass. That's it. But it's given its own special name of the Liskov substitution principle. I just love that expression. I can't say it enough. The next slide.
Oh,
sorry, you were napping.
That's right. Yep.
So what else can you do? Basically, this is only half a joke. If you read the code at 3 o'clock when you're drunk or very seriously hungover, and you can still fix it, then you've probably won. And why do I use that as my metric? Well, because I've been that maintenance programmer.
Yeah.
The pager goes off, the phone goes off, you get up, you groggily try to pour some coffee into your sleepy head and wait for the pounding to stop before you can actually log in, and then you have to try and fix some horrible mess of, well, in those days it was Perl code. And believe me, that's no fun with a hangover.
That's why we don't let them code anymore.
Or even, I mean, if the other alternative technique is just to take somebody who's not in your direct team, somebody from one team over, or maybe you've made friends with somebody in operations, which, by the way, is always a good thing to do, because they will save your ass more times than pretty much anyone else other than a priest or a plumber. And basically just walk them through your code. So if you've got a savvy operations person who wants to learn more about development and coding, or if you've got a friend in another team, just take 20 minutes, eat your lunch with them, sit down and pair, show them the basic layout of your code, see what they think of it. If their response is, what the fuck is this? You know you probably have a few issues.
And the interesting thing that comes out of this, and this is why we always talk about naming of things, is so incredibly important. And Eric Evans, with his domain-driven design, takes that to one extreme. But the point is, if you've got someone else reading your source code, and all they get out of it is list, array list, hash map, as kind of the core names that come out of it, you're doing something wrong. Right? So you need to, a person on the outside should be able to read the domain model of your core classes and know exactly what your application does.
Another trick that I've often used here is the newest, the most junior people coming into the team, put them on first-line support, make them responsible for production outages. It will scare the crap out of them, but if you feel that your system is too precious to be trusted with a guy that's just walked through the door, then you have bigger problems than trusting your system to a guy that's just walked through the door.
So, number 8. Who here is involved in a startup? A few of you here. So this is all the rage in Silicon Valley, of course, at the moment. London now has an area called the Silicon Roundabout. I believe there is some little startup groups happening in Berlin and other places around Europe. And so this whole concept of being a lean startup ninja has sort of come to the fore. And this basically defines what a lean startup ninja is. If your code compiles, you just damn well ship it and let the users deal with the mess. I mean, give you fast customer feedback.
In fact, didn't you do that just today?
We did that just today, actually. Some people call it continuous deployment. We call it compiles equal ship it. Yeah, that's fine.
So, again, I think Neil spoke a lot about this yesterday, but continuous delivery really is a business enabler. I mean, I've seen environments where the business and the IT department really had come to the point where they trusted each other so much that they were able to have communication. And it's weird how that same communication keeps coming back. It's almost like that's somehow fundamental to everything that we do as developers and technical people. But the business had reached the point where they trusted the guys in the development team so much that the flow of information and the flow of desire for releases was such that the business were actually fully engaged in the release process and were actually really asking for development to push the new code and to make releases more often.
So we know of some businesses in London especially, some price comparison websites, which are no small site or no small organization, they release 25 times a day. And the final decision is a business decision, but they have an internal copy of their site updated 20 times a day automatically with whatever new feature or bug patch gets put in. A business person will then look at it at the last second and just click the OK, it goes live button. And it's incredible how it's transformed their business because they can react to the market so much faster than anybody else. It's actually changed their entire organization. And I can't go into specifics about money, etc., but they've actually tripled their revenue in the space of 1 year because they were able to react to price changes in the market so much faster than everyone else. So it really does translate into real monetary value. So what can you do? Stop hating on these guys, right? So many developers hate doing build stuff. Absolutely hate it. Have to configure XML scripts, Maven downloads the entire internet, Jenkins breaks every second day, Puppet is something my children play with, and a vagrant is someone you give some spare change to, right?
How many people actually run continuous integration on their project? That's good. That's actually quite a lot better than last year.
Yeah.
So that's good. What about actual continuous deployment? So Puppet and actually pushing things out to production from there.
Yeah, okay, still much smaller. Okay, so that is the next step you guys should really seriously start thinking about. It will actually not just transform your technical team, it will transform your entire organization by being able to do this. There are case studies left, right, and center out there about this.
CV++. I think this is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Who here's a contractor or an independent consultant? Yeah, you guys know what we're talking about. So What you want to do as a contractor or an independent consultant, of course, is to stay ahead of the curve and to always know what the latest job trends are. So the highly scientific and highly accurate Tiobe index on the popularity of programming languages based on people typing in a keyword into Google search, scientific, sad times, is your friend. So if you see a trend towards, say, Scala happening in London, then you go away, you go online, learn Scala in 24 hours using one of those learn in 24-hour books, and you put it on your CV and you say, I've got 2 years experience with it. And it's highly effective because recruitment agents just simply do keyword searches on your CV anyway, right? So as long as you've got the latest technology on there and the technology that people want, such as COBOL. Oh, you may laugh, but tell you what, there are more retired COBOL programmers sitting on the beaches of Mexico than there will ever be Java developers retiring to the beaches of Mexico. So just think on that. So yeah, so learn the latest little trend of the Tiobe index and you're good to go.
Alternatively, you could try just actually being good at the principles of sound software development. You know, the truth is, regardless of what recruiters might tell you, you know, you need 5 years Java experience for this job, really. So after you've spent 6 to 9 months with Java, there's really a whole lot more stuff you're going to learn in the next 5 years about the core language, is there? How about no? How about actually just being good at development and trying out different languages to make yourself a better programmer? Because the more languages that I've learned to program in, I found that actually the benefits carry over into all of the other languages that I knew. You know, I start looking at Java code after having been doing a certain amount of functional programming and find myself thinking about, okay, so, all right, Java doesn't have functional programming, but what can I do which I can use to kind of simulate it? How can I shape my code in that kind of way? So learning more and learning about the fundamental tools in the toolbox and learning a range of different technologies and a range of different languages helps you round out your skill set. And if you really are interested in how the industry is shaping up and, you know, some of the trends and where we're going, then rather than Tiobe or Gartner or anybody else, the firm I'd recommend you actually check out is a firm called RedMonk. These guys are analysts and developers, and they understand development, and they do a lot of work with actual real data rather than just, you know, interviewing people and looking at Google keywords.
Yeah. So a guiding principle for yourself is that it used to be hip and cool, and Hollywood used to portray kind of the lone geeky programmer being the absolute specialist in a particular technology or a language. Being a good software developer trumps that time and time and time again. We're personally not interested in hiring good programmers at all. We're interested in hiring good software developers. And there is a subtle difference between the two. Well, not so subtle, really. A good software developer understands the full life cycle of a technology project, right from the inception all the way through to the DevOps, continuous integration, continuous delivery, UI, UX, how to design, how to deal with a messaging system, how to deal with data storage, all of these things which are completely outside of knowing Java, the programming language, better than Josh Block or James Gosling, right? So if you are going to focus on your talents and your time and effort, focus on being a better developer and don't necessarily worry about learning the complete ins and outs of Java to the nth degree. Next anti-pattern, I has the cloud. Who here is doing cloud development now? Yay. Who here is relying on Amazon? Who here is regretting it?
Resilience solution on top of EC2? Nobody, yes.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because it's the cloud, right? That's what this anti-pattern's all about.
Yeah. If you put stuff on the cloud, it's safe and it's replicated all around the world and nothing will ever go wrong and nothing will go down. Oops.
And it's not affected by the weather, right?
Yeah. Clouds are not affected by the weather. So there have been some pretty major public outages based off major cloud providers such as Amazon and Google and so on and so forth. Just jumping into the cloud is one of the stupidest anti-patterns we have seen this year.
Yep. And probably next year as well. And I predict some pretty high-profile failures next year.
Yeah, the hype curve is long.
Okay. But what can you do? You can evaluate and prototype. And fortunately, you've got a great selection of providers and tech to choose from. EC2, Heroku, JElastic, Cloudbees, OpenShift, well, has Cloudbees fans down the front. Giant, there are some really good firms out there doing some great stuff, and it's very easy to get hosted on them. In a lot of cases, you can get started with some QA or some trial applications for nothing or extremely close to it, and try it out. It is a brave new world. There are, if anyone's ever read the paper on the classic fallacies of distributed computing, well, those kind of were true when you were on a local area network and when you were building your own infrastructure. But when you go out to cloud, those things can and will go wrong. If you're on an EC2 instance, at some point it's going to go away from underneath you, and you need to be prepared for that.
So I guess one of the things that we've seen this year is there has been this trend. Java has moved very strongly onto the cloud this year. I think we've counted 16 different either PaaS or SaaS or IaaS providers that are now offering the JVM as a serious machine to deploy to. So it's really, really easy to sign up with these providers for absolutely free and to try them out and to see if that lovely little WAR file that you drop into your local Tomcat will actually work in this brave new world. Again, a brown bag session sitting with your friends and colleagues at a lunchtime, firing up an Amazon EC2 instance and just checking to see if your nice code works out there is a great way to start. So on top of cloud, we have Haz Mobile. Who here is doing some Android or iOS development? Who here is making money off it? Thought so? Right, so here is this, again, is another great fallacy that if you get into this mobile space, you will become an instant millionaire. And as people are starting to discover, unless you are a major game studio who is capable of spending a £3 million budget on a great game for Android, such as Angry Birds, it's actually very, very difficult. So,
HTML5 is going to save us, right?
HTML5 will save us. Yeah, no. So, James Gosling was doing his community keynote at Java 1, it was about a month or so ago now, and he was showing real live telemetry data from his automated submersibles floating around the ocean collecting really cool data. It was a really cool demo. And he kind of showed us the difference of trying to do it in HTML5 technology and just actually using Swing of all things. And Swing kind of won by a long shot. So don't believe in the hype of HTML5. It's not even a standard yet. It probably won't be until about 2021.
But it's going to be a living standard, because that doesn't mean whatever the fuck the browser vendors come up with.
Yeah. So we have actually evaluated and prototyped HTML5 pretty heavily ourselves, and it does some amazing things until you get the 20% of your users using a browser which doesn't support feature X. So it still is a bit of a nightmare.
So straightforward, figure out what your UX needs are, and this is probably the one area where we see some green shoots, but where we still have an awful long way to go. UX is so important, and it's still so badly done for so many applications. Once again, it comes back to that cross-communication, talking to people that aren't necessarily Java developers, talking to your designers and your front-end people.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm not a UX designer, I don't know how to do this, I'm just a developer, I suck at doing UI. Just think about what pisses you off, right? You all use Android phones or iOS phones, you all use tablets, you all use desktops. Think about the things that annoy you and apply those to your projects. Big data.
Big data.
Big data. Who here is doing big data? Do you actually know what to do with all that data? One person does. Fantastic. You're a winner. MongoDB.
I love the fact we didn't actually have to talk about MongoDB at all. Everyone's just sitting there and everyone just goes, yeah, that's completely fair. So the question is really, what type of data are you storing? Your data is it's king. If you really do have a size of data which it requires you to use big data, then actually just take some time to stop and think about it.
Absolutely. And it's the non-functionals that really matter an awful lot. A lot of people jump into the NoSQL space and the big data space, and then their business turns around and says, but I don't have my reports anymore. How do I get the data out? How do I run analytics over it? And you shrug your shoulders and say, But we're using a distributed cluster using MongoDB and Cassandra, and it's replicated across the world. Isn't that cool?
And to run your report, all you need to do is write a distributed MapReduce function.
And they go, you just told me to go fuck myself. So, in conclusion to all of these anti-patterns, whatever you do, take a deep, deep breath, avoid the hype curves, don't get caught up in the bullshit that's on Hacker News, prototype, evaluate, do stuff scientifically, and thank you very much for listening. That's the end of our time.